Happy Vegas, Happy New Year, etc., etc. Thank you for joining us. We talked a little bit about ad tech, state of what's going on in the business. Something that we probably all hold close to our hearts, and the role of satisfying marketing objectives. How cleanly does that line up when we're at a Brand Innovators conference? I think they fuel one another. And I'm here with Scott Ensign, who's a practitioner of the trade, to say the least, Chief Strategy Officer at Butler. So, I'm going to pass it to you. Maybe you can say a couple words about Butler.
Sure. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. John, Brand Innovators. So I'm a little bit of a last-minute ad, just to be clear. Joe Coy's writers wrote all of my material, in case anybody doesn't like something that I say. But Butler's still kind of a unique agency. We are really a media agency is how people think of us. But what makes us unique is, as we like to say, we're a purpose-fueled media agency, and the proof points for that are that we're 100% employee-owned. We're a certified B Corp. We are a women-owned, women-led company. And we like to talk about, which I think is very relevant to this conversation and what's going on in our space right now, our kind of enduring purpose as a company. The reason for being is to create connections and make a difference. And so that's really what all of our people as employee owners are lined up behind.
So tell me, what does a Chief Strategy Officer do?
That is a great question. So
I
wasn't prepared for that one. I would say the big difference, I think a lot of when you think of agency strategy and chief strategy officers, it's more kind of brand strategy. But for my role, although I'm certainly involved in client strategy, in fact, heading off to a client meeting after this, my main function at the agency is to continually evolve our offering. And so the main thing that I'm involved in is making sure with partners like Adform that we're taking advantage of not just what our clients need today in terms of what we offer, but really what's coming next, what's down the road. So if you think about it in terms of kind of the classic horizons, I'm really focused mostly on Horizon 3, like what's coming next and what's going to be important, not just for this month's report or for the next QBR, but to have a client long into the future.
So let's talk about the role of agencies as shepherds, right? Because brands are busy making products to sell to consumers, and they need to navigate a very complex ecosystem. Obviously, rely on their agencies to help them navigate that process so they can get back to building cereal or insurance plans, whatever have you. Recently, there was a big report that came out from the ANA. I don't know if you guys have said it. It's an incredible must-reading called the ANA Transparent Programmatic Study. Highly recommend that you read it because it's the state of the affairs of what's going on in the business. And divulged a lot of the silliness around who are the principals of advertising versus who are the agents of the ad tech, and who has the end relationship with the customer isn't always the principals. And how people make money off of ad tech is becoming more and more available. And so this report that came out was critical, and I imagine as a shepherd to brands to help them understand. What was your opinion of what they found?
Yeah, it was interesting. And so if you take John's advice, just know that you're signing up to read roughly a 125-page document, which is a lot of industry, not just industry inside baseball, but kind of sub-industry inside baseball about programmatic buying. And I think that report to me was a perfect example, and I may be slightly biased here, of why agencies are so crucial to the conversation. Because the programmatic space is, I think in some ways, intentionally complex, which is a lot of what this report was focused on. And so understanding where your dollars are going is not a simple task anymore. And I think if you are approaching media and that's the thing about the agency landscape, is there's all kinds of different agencies. We get lumped together in a lot of ways, but if you think about media shops, which Butler Till by heritage, we've been doing paid media for 25 years, it's often seen as kind of transactional and at the end of the work stream. And so just naturally, you often get put into a bucket of like, you're the kind of doers, you're the one who's executing on a strategy that's been set by others, by maybe a brand agency, creative agency, whatever, at a point upstream. But that report, to me, really lays out that this is not merely a transactional relationship. There are strategic business assets in play in the way that you buy and how you're approaching the marketplace. And you know, if you talk to Facebook these days, they'll tell you, like, creative is media, and media is creative. Like, pulling these things apart doesn't really work anymore. And I think approaching the paid media space from a purely transactional point of view, and you know, as John, you and I were talking about earlier, you're going and participating in what then becomes kind of a race to the bottom. You're gonna find yourself in trouble, which is what the ANA report really spent a lot of time pointing out.
Yeah, one of the key metrics in that report is the relationship between media metrics and business outcomes needs to become cleaner. And what is driving the focus of media buying, to Scott's point, is cost. But the return on that cost of business outcomes, there's no direct correlation between media metrics and those business outcomes unless you got a really sweet attribution engine, which not really has been built yet. And that's a work in progress. And so I'm interested to hear how often you have the right to push back when you're being compensated / evaluated on media metrics, but the business outcome side of the business of what you're helping with isn't as transparent as you need it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as an agency, we feel pretty empowered to push back. I think if you think about the reasons that you hire an agency, those things have changed tremendously, particularly in my view. And I just have a front row seat to this, a media agency. It is, as I said, not just the value proposition for a really good progressive media agencies these days cannot be centered merely around something like arbitrage, buying power, your seat at the upfronts, things like that. You have to have really, really smart marketers. So we feel empowered to have those conversations with clients. I'm not going to sit here and say that we are successful in all of those conversations. And one of the ongoing challenges for media, to your point, is because we can boil it down to a metric and a number, it often gets put into a procurement exercise. It's often thought of as a little bit more of a commodity. But I think that the space is really waking up, and this year, 2024, and everything that's going on, especially in the biddable, addressable digital media space, is pointing towards a year of massive disruption and transition. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that. The industry is focusing on things like attention metrics, which I think is a good step in the right direction. I'm not saying it's necessarily the end-all, be-all, but it's a good product. I saw Phil from Gum Gum here, and they own Playground XYZ, which is one of those products. So I think that the conversation is changing. It's just like these are large companies, large budgets, and so that's just not going to change on a dime. But I think the ones who are able to move fast and be agile and think more strategically about media and not see it just as a race to the bottom or a commodity are going to have a real advantage.
So is consolidation good for the business?
I think forms of consolidation can be good. And so there have been sometimes too many players in a given space, certainly not the DSP space, which there's just the right amount, and maybe we could even use more. But I think, yes, and part of the problem is if you look at what the transparency report from the ANA had to say, is there's a lot of reselling in the programmatic ecosystem from perhaps supply-side partner to supply-side partner. That's not necessarily adding any value, so some consolidation of those things I think is valuable. The thing that's a concern to me, you know, as I mentioned, we're a values-driven organization, we're a B Corp, of course. DEI, as a result, is very important to us, and it's very important to our people. And our people are not just, you know, a group of employees that we're trying to keep happy. They're literally the owners of the company. Because of our structure, every employee of Butler is an owner, and every owner of Butler is an employee. And so we have deep, specific material accountability to those stakeholders, and DEI is incredibly important to them. So if you look at that report, part of the challenge of consolidation, one of the recommendations was that you should focus on a certain number of websites, a certain number of publishing partners. And the concern for me is that in doing so, in the interest of quality, you can raise barriers to entry for all kinds of players that are already probably too high. So if you skinny down your number of publishers to 75 to 100 large publishing partners, a smaller minority-owned, women-owned publisher who's trying to crack into that business is just going to have a higher and higher and higher fence to clear. So I think that's something that we really need to be cognizant of as an industry.
Yeah, so imagine a day in which the folks that built the printing press for the New York Times said, we're going to hold on to your subscription lists as well. Like, we're going to print the newspaper and ship it out, but we're also going to own the relationship with your customers. They would have not picked that printing press manufacturing company, but yet we pick ad tech companies that then say, I have a right to your customers. Why is that?
Well, I think if when that happened, there was only one printing press and one person had it, or a couple of them, that goes to the consolidation question. People may not have had a choice. And I think to the credit of some of the big ad tech companies, they saw, whether by accident or by some kind of master plan, they saw the value of that kind of data very early on. And the value in amassing that data, even when they did not necessarily have a clear view to what the monetization strategy was going to be. And so that was a stroke of genius in some ways. To your point, I'm not sure that it serves brands as well as it should.
On the publisher side as well.
Absolutely. Having your own relationships with your customers for brands, for publishers, even for us as agencies, is very, very critically important. And so, as we talked about earlier, I see 2024 is going to be kind of the year of the independents. And like I said, I'm a little bit biased. We're probably fiercely independent as an agency. No outside ownership. We answer only to our clients and our employee owners. And I think that when you're working with ad tech players, seeing what are the incentives for that ad tech company to buy a certain way, to push you towards a certain inventory situation, to push you towards a certain data provider, I think those are things that you just have to be aware of as a marketer and as a brand.
If you could pick the top 3 things that you think brands need to be educated upon in 2024, what are they? And do they line up in which the sell side, lots of folks in the room here, are also helping with that education effort?
Yeah, I hesitate to bring this up because it's been talked about so much for so many years, but with cookies going away and that finally actually materially happening as we sit here, which is hard to believe because it's been so many years that we've been talking about it, I think understanding identity resolution is something that marketers need to really take some giant leaps forward on. And so agency partners are great. A lot of ad tech partners are great in terms of leaning in and helping with that. The addressability of cookies has been going down for years, and this is just kind of the last step off of that train for our industry, I would say. So understanding what you're doing with your first-party data in terms of identity resolution is going to be critical. And therefore, having a mix of data where you can use the best data available is going to be really, really important for brands. I think getting into the supply chain of media for marketers is another thing that's really, really important. Understanding not just who you're working with from a buying platform perspective, but where that inventory is coming from, how many stops it's making along the way, where all of those dollars are going is important, which is not to say you're necessarily going to try to squeeze certain players, but I think you can't really optimize your spend and your connections that you're making with your audience unless you really know where that dollar is going from buying platform all the way through to ultimately publishing partner. And then the third thing that I think is really important for brands is understanding the right kind of partner set to accomplish what you're looking to do, particularly in a full media plan. So there are so many partner options. Some partners make it easy for you. They offer you a lot of goodies if you do things a certain way, but it might not be in the long-term interest of your brand. So we're seeing a lot of movement, and transparently, some of that is good for us, some of it is challenging for us, where brands post-pandemic, I feel like this is really the year where everyone's picking their head up and saying, like, we've been standing pat in this area for a while for understandable and good reasons, but now we're really going to take a scan of the marketplace. And I think understanding your ad tech partner set and what that should be is one of the things that brands should be really focused on.
So I want to talk a little bit about access to data, because it's such an interesting topic. I'm kidding, it's not. There's at the ANA Programmatic, they asked 63, the programmatic study of transparency, they asked 63 brands if they would like to participate. Excuse me, that's wrong. They asked more than 63. 63 said, yes, we would like to participate. And they went and talked to their ad tech providers. And of those 63, only 21 were allowed to access their data to find out what was being transparent. So 2/3 were not looking at the contracts, the level in which they were signing with their ad tech partners to get the lot level data to actually understand what's going on under the curtain. So that's step number one from pieces of education, right? We have constituencies that are signing contracts that don't understand the media impact on the other side. Then secondly, when you get the actual data, what do we do with it? I'm going to answer my own question.
Yeah.
In 2024, I think we're going to see an awakening of what to do with data. And I think that we're going to see below the line and above the line start to get smushed. Because with the advent of retail media networks, you're now having two stakeholders, having both below the line marketers, people that are doing loyalty marketing with the retailers, and the people that are buying media off channel, are being pitched on by one retailer, and they're being forced to consolidate those budgets. So I want to just bring out in front here, if you have a point of view, not just on retail media network, but are we getting to the point in which the data is going to be able to see the impact in real time at the retail levels, but also with consumers, where one tactic, chief marketing officer, will handle everything in its entirety, which goes out influencing consumer buying?
I think the trend is certainly moving in that direction. And understanding what to do, to your point, with that data, those are the brands who are going to have an advantage. And so the idea that customer data and some kind of marketing data are and should be separate and never kind of cross streams like a 1980s Ghostbusters film, that's not realistic anymore. And I love the retail media space. I think it holds a lot of promise for addressing privacy concerns. I think it holds a lot of promise for addressing attribution, to your point. I think what we're dealing with right now is the just rapid proliferation of retail media. And actually, I guess that would kind of bring to mind a question I have for you, because you see a lot of this stuff on the platform side. Like where do you see that retail media space going? So you have obviously Amazon kind of really leaned in and in many ways invented that. Walmart is huge in that space, and now it seems like every other business who's even kind of on the periphery of that is launching some kind of retail media network. So what do you see happening with that? I mean, obviously brands, it's really hard to make those decisions these days. What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, I think the CFO is going to wonder why they're not getting the impact from both sides of the CFO of the brand is not, I'm a retailer, and I say, hey, Kellogg's, come and spend more money with me on media to do it. I would say, well, what am I doing in my in-store marketing? And why are you charging me for that data? Because I built the retail stores, and that conflict is going to be pushed through, showing, fine, then I need an attribution model to show that that's really going to be worth it. Back to this data point. So I think there's going to be a push for more data transparency to show the return on ad spend, and the head of media and the head of below-the-line marketing are going to get an alignment to say, that's not paying out on my return on ad spend. What I'm seeing in retail media network, I see that you have more control of it, but you only have X number of people on your platform. You have to go out and get more. So why am I using you as my media buying agency? Right? So now are retailers becoming media buyers unto themselves? And does that serve your relationship with the brands?
Yeah. I mean, no, definitely not. But no, I think that that's one of the ways that things are going. I think what retailers are looking to then media agencies who understand the space, who understand the buying pipes, to serve in that function for them. So I think it's an opportunity for really strategic media companies to say, like, we can be the retail media arm. So, and we've had conversations with brands about that, where it might be a brand where we would have done their media at one point, but now we're doing media for them on behalf of that long tail of suppliers, which I think there is such a huge long tail to unlock there. It's just a matter of how do you do that across 30 retail media networks, 50 retail media networks in a way that talks to each other and has some level of interoperability. I think that's going to be a really interesting challenge that we'll have to iron out along the way.
So we haven't said the word AI once, so that was the one time I'm going to say it. Are there any questions from the audience? Because we're getting close. Yes, please.
Yeah. So the question is the role, just so everyone can hear, the role of the brand marketer when you think about something really highly technical and industry specific, like the deprecation of the third-party cookie. I think that's a real challenge, because one thing that we are constantly reminding ourselves of is our clients often, as brand marketers, like, they have a whole host of things that are going on. They are not just media people. Media is one portion of their job, which could be 10% of their job, it could be 50% of their job, depending on the brand and the engagement that we have with them. I do think, I mean, ultimately, all of the money that's coming through our agency, all of the money that's going through a platform like Adform is the brand's money. Like, that's where the money is coming from. So if I were a brand marketer, I would take that very seriously. If I were a CMO on the brand side, and we're seeing this with our clients who are demanding that their teams level up to a much higher level of sophistication and strategy in the activation space, but that is definitely, again, I think those are the brands who will have an advantage going forward if they can build a team that really understands that. Not to say that you don't still need an agency, of course, you still need an agency, but that way you can have really strategic partnership discussions with that agency to move the business forward, rather than just like, here's my budget, give me as many cheap CPMs as you possibly can as a result of this, and how's that CPM trending? I think that is part of understanding the space, is knowing that those are really the wrong metrics to look at. Not that you don't look at them at all, but they're not the real North Star of a modern media campaign.
So I know there's more questions, but we're being told that we're out. So thank you all for attending. Scott will be here at the end if you have more questions to offer your time. But thank you all for joining.